Delight to be here today with Udi Goren, who is a travel photographer, speaker, teacher, and an artist who, among other things, writes and speaks a great deal about his photographic journey of the Israel National Trail. So thank you for taking time to talk.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So to jump right in, as someone who engaged on this Israel National Trail and who is a photographer, how does that work? Inspire or inform how you think of the current conflict and how you think of Zionism itself?
So I think the main impact the trail has had on me is when I set out. I started this journey right after the last conflict with Gaza, when tension was super high. Israel was split into two regarding this issue, and I've started walking Israel. And then I started meeting people of all walks of life, all parts of Israeli society, including the Israeli Arabs. And when I've started meeting people and actually engaging in conversation and just having this person-to-person encounter, I found that it surpasses really any conflict, because most people, I would say every person I've met, wants the exact same thing, and it doesn't matter if they were Haredi, if they were Druze, if they were Israeli Arabs, whoever they were, they all want safety, tranquility. They want to get up in the morning, go do their work, see their family, make sure their kids have proper education. So this is something that we all have in common, and even though it sounds very simplistic, but once you really see it and experience it, is when you really can internalize it.
It's easier to dehumanize when the person doesn't really exist in your mind, right?
100%.
They want, all they want is evil or destruction. They don't want right with the things that we want.
Exactly.
So we're so immersed today in the conflict, in the current political process in Israel, that it's difficult to rewind. But if we rewind the clock 70 or so years, how do you understand what the original Zionist vision was?
I want to say that when you read anything of the founding fathers of Israel, the thinkers of Zionism, it was very clear to all of them that Israel is going to be a multinational country. The Arabs of Israel, the Palestinians of Israel, were a part of the country that they took for granted, that they were there. They all spoke about minority rights. They all spoke about how we have to coexist and give them equal rights and equal representation. And I'm talking even people like Jabotinsky, the father of the revisionist movement, the forefather of the current Likud party that last year passed the nationality law, which is it's 180 degrees to what he believed in. It's the exact opposite. It deprives the minorities of Israel from their basic right of considering Israel as their homeland. This is actually one of the things that it claims, that only Jews have the right of self-determination in Israel. So what if you're a Palestinian or a Druze or a Bedouin and you're born in Israel, then you can't call yourself an Israeli? You're not even giving them a chance to be a part of the Israeli society? What are they? Where do they belong to?
Right. So, and then how do you understand, who poses a threat to that vision today? And what is that new perception that is being is being put in place of that original vision?
So Zionism, I would say, the state of Israel, defined as a Jewish and democratic country. So this is a spectrum, right? These two things don't really coexist at the same place, but on one hand you have democratic, and on the other hand you have Jewish. And then we have to define where we are on the spectrum. Because if we're very extreme on the Jewish side, then it means that all the minorities don't have the same rights as us. If we're very extreme on the democratic side, then the fear is that we may lose the Jewish identity. And I think that in recent years, there has been so much push towards the Jewish side because of the political system in Israel, because of the disproportional political power that the religious parties had, not necessarily the religious parties as in the Haredi parties, but more of the
religious nationalists.
Exactly,
Yeah.
religious nationalists.
Dati Leumi.
The Tilumi, exactly, who represent mostly the settler ideology, and that leaves no room for anyone else in Israel, and that actually leaves no room for the democratic side of Israel. And if we're going that way, and they have gotten so much more political power, really, and this is something we can talk about for hours, but what happened after the disengagement from Gaza, this is the backlash of it. They had such a downfall being taken out of Gaza that this was actually an actual decision that they took, that they have to gain more political power to make sure this doesn't happen again. And today there's a lot of people in power, not just in the parliament, in many different aspects of Israeli government, that have this ideology.
Yeah.
And that means, and that's an ideology of the not, meaning of not what we do have and build upon that. It's what we're not. We're definitely not Arabs. We're definitely not Palestinians. We're definitely not them. We're us. We have to be enclosed and protect ourselves and keep to ourselves and make sure that there's no mixing, make sure there's no, the real word I would use, advancement. There's no advancement to anywhere to a place that can provide a proper home for the two nations. And this is something that, we could go so deep into this political discussion, but at the end, I have a very simple argument. We're not going anywhere. They're not going anywhere. Either we stay at this constant friction, at this constant state of stressful hatred, or we build upon our mutual interests and build towards a solution. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. These are our only two options.
And so in that us and them framework, everything is a zero-sum game, where any gain from the other is a loss to us, as opposed to understanding what could be built in collaboration, and ultimately in friendship. So let me ask you one last question. If I'm a liberal American Jew, and I feel disillusioned and disenfranchised and really, in some cases, embarrassed by policies or the way I understand oppression or lack of rights of minorities in Israel, why should I still consider being a Zionist? If I feel that original Zionist dream has been abandoned, why should I consider still supporting Israel and still consider myself a Zionist?
Again, to be very simplistic, because you're letting the bad guys win. Because if you considered Zionism just that, settler movement, dehumanizing of the Arab minorities, if this is what Zionism is for you, then you're letting them dictate what Zionism is. And that's not what it is. Zionism is simply about having a home to the Jewish people. If you know your own personal history, go 2 generations back, and if you are saying the Jews do not deserve a home, all right, then we really have nothing to talk about.
Yeah.
I am a strong Zionist. I strongly believe the Jews deserve a national home. This does not mean in any way that I think that we should deprive minorities, that we should deprive others of their basic rights, that I don't believe in equality within Israel and outside of Israel, that I think that controlling another people by force is wrong. I can be a Zionist and a serious critic of the Israeli policy. Mm-hmm. That does not mean that I abandon this original idea. Mm-hmm. But I am determining Zionism as I see it.
Yeah.
And I'm not. These two things can coexist.
Right.
I can be a strong supporter of Israel, and I am.
Right.
And I can definitely criticize the policy it's been leading in the last couple of years, and even more than a couple of years. Definitely, what has happened in the last 15 years or more. And these things can coexist.
Yeah.
I can definitely be a supporter of Israel, a proud Jew, and still criticize what's
And those
happening.
who want to bully will say, actually, you're disloyal. If you critique, whether you're in the diaspora or Israel, if you critique, then you are not a Zionist, you are disloyal. And I think that your point is very important, that actually you can hold those two truths together at the same time. Let me make one last point, and I wonder if you would agree that in addition to being Zionism as a safe home for the Jews, in addition to not equating nationalism with Zionism, meaning part of our national vision and dream has to do with minorities in the land, I'm also inspired by one of my Rebbes, Rav Kook, who believed part of the national vision was a universalistic vision, that Israel could be an Or LaGoyim, that we could actually be a moral model for internationally. So Gantz just said today, political candidate Gantz said that that he would not allow arms trade to countries that commit genocide or acts of atrocity, and I think at the least stopping any kind of harm that's caused, and at the most being a force for good globally. And I wonder if that would be a part of your Zionist vision as well.
100%. I think, again, this is a topic that we can delve into for hours, but I feel that Israel has neglected its role as an Or LaGoyim, and I do believe, because of our history, because of what we bring to the table in terms of values, in terms of what we've gone through in the past century, that the lessons to learn from it are universal. It's not just for us. It's not just protecting us. It's definitely not selling arms where they shouldn't go.
Okay, so I lied. I have one last question. So the counter argument here would be, Udi, you're naive. You're naive. The founders, if they knew what we knew today, they would say, what are you talking about? After decades of trying to make peace and we couldn't, the Arabs are not our friends. The Palestinians are enemies. You cannot rewind the clock. And we know that today. So to try to pretend like giving rights is actually in any way going to enhance our vision or our survival is naive. How would you respond to that?
It's a lie. It's just not true. You just look at the numbers. Look at what really is happening. We have peace with Jordan. We have peace with Egypt. We haven't had any official hostility between us and the other neighboring countries. We are getting much closer to all of the Arab nations under Netanyahu because they want our technology. So if we started building on mutual interest, and the Palestinians, ever since the Second Intifada, in the past 17 years, there has been full collaboration with the Palestinian authorities. Not with Hamas, that's a different story, different deal. But with the Palestinian Authority, the governing body of the Palestinians, recognized in the UN, that's really recognized by the world as representing the Palestinians, we have full collaboration. Collaboration. There has not been any hostility coming out of the West Bank into Israel because of this collaboration. So the time is ripe for advancing this into some kind of an agreement, building upon these mutual interests, and actually taking it to the next level.
So what you're saying is that the conflict is real, but unprecedented legitimacy, unprecedented security, and it is political rhetoric that is essentially fueling this sense of division.
We've never been more powerful. We've never been more safe. We've never had such global support in any initiative at this point that we would take towards reaching any kind of an agreement with the Palestinians would not only have the overwhelming support of Europe and the US, I'm sure it would also have the financial support of both parties. So there's no time right now. We've never been better off in any way you look at it.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, thanks, Udi Goren. Make sure to check out his book being translated to English now.
That's right.
Photographic Journey of the Israel National Trail.
Coming out next year.